Salvage his political legacy today with a stop by the Capitol. His mission, fighting the repeal of his eponymous health care law. He urged Democrats not to rescue Republicans when they try to pass a replacement to it, and to brand any new law as Trump Care. Democrats seem to embrace that strategy. The stage is now set for yet another fiery health care debate. Take a look at part of it.
But the first order of business is to repeal and replace Obamacare.
We're here today to warn the American people that the Republican plan to cut Medicare, Medicaid, repeal the ACA will make America sick again.
This law has failed. Americans are struggling. The law is failing while we speak. We need to reverse the damage that has been done.
In this case, all politics is personal.
We're going to work hard every day, not just to repeal Obamacare, but to replace it with reforms that actually put patients back in charge of their health care decisions.
We're going to keep our promise to the American people, and we're going to repeal Obamacare.
The Republicans say repeal and replace. The only thing that has going for it is alliteration.
Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut was in that meeting with President Obama, and he joins us now from the Russell Rotunda over at the Capitol. Congressman, thanks a lot for joining us.
Hi, Tucker. How are you?
I'm great. So, I mean, just a macro question here. I understand that this is the president's signature achievement as president, has his name on it, and there are probably some things about it that we could all agree are fine. But basically, it's a flawed piece of legislation that the public has never fully embraced. Why are Democrats defending it as vigorously as they are?
Well, you know, at some level it has nothing to do with the politics. I mean, you said the public has never embraced it, and you're right. It's always sort of been 50-50 here and there. But the fact of the matter is that when you talk about the various elements of it, like you don't get turned away if you have a pre-existing condition, the fact that, you know, in my own state, the coverage rates have gone way, way, way up. The idea, 70% of Americans supporting the fact that your kids can stay on your insurance till you're 26. If you list the 5 or 6 things that are core to Obamacare, people love it. The problem is, of course, for 7 years they've been told it's evil as Obamacare and whatnot. And so now the Republicans find themselves in the position of having to navigate that paradox.
Is that really your argument, that people don't love it because they've been lied to? I mean, people are experiencing Obamacare, and you haven't gotten the law has not gotten the costs under control. You've conceded that to your own constituents. I just watched a tape of you admitting that. That was the core promise of Obamacare. We're going to get health care costs under control, and it didn't do it. So why not just admit that?
So that wasn't the core promise of Obamacare. The core promise of Obamacare was that for the first time in a very long, for the first time ever, the United States would have the ability to cover all of its people. And I will reiterate what I've said. No one, including under Obamacare, has managed to get the cost of the industry under control the way we would like to. But at the end of the day, look, this isn't about who says what or who's, and there, yes, there was a lot of lying, but the fact of the matter is you've got 20 or 30 million Americans out there who have insurance that didn't have it before. You've got seniors who are paying less for their drugs. So, you know, this idea that somehow this thing is a massive failure, that it's crumbling of its own weight, is something that is a bumper sticker that most Americans, and this will be the test, when most Americans, if there is a repeal and no replace, and they realize, oh my God, look at what just happened, they will be infuriated. And this, of course, is why we're hearing from Rand Paul, and, you know, that we can't do repeal, we've got to talk about replace.
Okay. I understand you've got a lot vested in this. You voted for it. I'm sure you agree with lots of parts of it. All of that is fine. But you're making a nonsensical argument. You're saying that the public loves Obamacare, but you're also conceding that they don't actually love Obamacare because it's never really gotten above 50%. A law that has transformed the life of every person in this country does not have majority support nationally. That is itself a failure, isn't it? And by the way, why don't they love it if it's so great? I don't understand.
Well, look, it's a very complicated thing, and part of the reason they don't love it is because the conservative right wing started out, and you used the word lie, but they started out with death panels, okay? There were going to be panels that decided whether grandma lived or died, right? And every single moment in states that if they had in fact expanded Medicaid, very poor states like Mississippi and Alabama, if they'd expanded Medicaid, they'd have much healthier populations. They didn't do that. So there are people in those states who should have the benefit of it, who haven't experienced it. But I promise you this, Tucker, and look, public perception goes here or there, and it'll move around. Around something as complicated as health care, it's not surprising that it's not up at 70 or 80% approval. But they have, yes, they have been lied to. They were told about death panels.
I mean, look, you're a smart guy. You were in business before you went to Congress. Do you really believe that because conservative websites criticized Obamacare, or Sarah Palin used the term death panels, that lo these many years after its passage, Americans are still ignoring their own best interests and saying they don't like it just because they believe Sarah Palin from 7 years ago? I mean, you don't really believe that, do you? 1/3 of counties in America have only one insurance provider. That's not a win, is it?
I'm not making the argument, and I wouldn't make the argument, I've never made the argument that Obamacare was perfect. We're talking about a massively complicated thing here. So yes, there is some instability in the exchanges out there. There have been areas in small businesses and other areas where premiums have gone up more than we would have liked. But look, you cannot argue with the fact that every senior on Medicare out there is now paying less for their drugs, that the donut hole is closing. Again, 20 or 30 million Americans, the number's 20 million of people who now have coverage that don't. Those are facts that you, look, we don't need to argue about this, because if the Republicans repeal this thing without a replacement, you are going to see an uprising, you're going to see anger, and we'll be talking, 2 months from now about, my God, what did they just do?
Okay, so in other words, it's on the Republicans now, and you may be right. I mean, the Republicans now run everything, or they will at the end of this month. But you're not telling the entire truth about the costs here. So the costs fall disproportionately on the young and healthy. Has it occurred to you that that is the poorest segment of our society? Look at any chart. The poorest people are the youngest, the richest people are the oldest. Obamacare shifts the cost from the young and the healthy, there's the chart right there, to the old and the sick. It is the most regressive possible way to pay for anything, and as a Democrat who believes in helping the needy, I'm surprised you would support something like that.
Well, actually, I think you've got it exactly backward. As you know, the poor and the elderly are precisely the populations that are covered by Medicaid and Medicare, respectively. Programs that are highly popular.
Right. But by the way, that's, I guess, another obvious question, which is those programs are very popular. You've never explained why Obamacare is not as popular as Medicare and Medicaid. But anyway, the truth is Obamacare is entering a death spiral in a lot of states precisely because young people have decided it's not in their interest to sign up for it. So that's just a very basic problem, but it's also revealing of the basic unfairness. The poorest people are paying for the richest people to get health care.
Well, again, you're just dead wrong about that. The only people who are paying more under Obamacare are the people with incomes over $250,000 who saw a little bit of an uptick on the Medicare payments that they have to make on their passive income, on their interest on their dividends. So you've got it exactly backward. But let's go back to young people, because I think they're really core. Okay, young people, you hate the mandate. The Republicans hate the mandate. I get that. I don't like the idea that the government tells me I don't like the idea that the government tells me what I have to do. But look, the idea that a young person who's immortal, look, I was 23 once too, and I was immortal. But what happens when I get hit by a bus and I'm not insured? You and I both know what happens, which is that you and I, with health care plans, pay for that immortal 23-year-old to get treated in a hospital. So this idea, the core of what people hate at the mandate is about personal responsibility.
It's about personal responsibility.
It's about personal responsibility.
You know what? That's a deeply, with respect, disingenuous thing for you to say. As the father of a 22-year-old, I can tell you, my child would be happy to buy catastrophic care coverage for that incident you refer to, and yet my kids have to buy, we all do, coverage that includes pregnancy and maternity care, breastfeeding coverage, birth control coverage. Why can't my children, who don't make much money, buy catastrophic care coverage, the coverage they want? Because they're subsidizing other people. That's why.
Okay.
And you know that.
Well, let me answer that question with a question to you. You're a 22-year-old who would like a catastrophic plan with no coverage for pregnancy or for breastfeeding. Is it possible, Tucker, that your 22-year-old might someday, I don't know if your 22-year-old's a man or a woman, but might have a child? Is that possible?
Probably unlikely that my son will have to pay for his breastfeeding, but look, my point is, leaving aside my own children...
That's disingenuous, Tucker. He may not have to breastfeed, but his wife will. Come on.
Please, look, your argument is that young people are not likely to get sick. True, but it's possible they will, some sort of tragedy will befall them and will be stuck with the cost. So why shouldn't they be able to buy insurance against that? And the answer is that a bunch of lobbyists here in D.C., where I live, and I know how this works, got in there and said, no, cover the service I represent, cover the company I represent. This was a trough. A ton of people got rich on it, and it shafted young people who don't have any money. As you know, that's why they're not buying cars, they're not buying houses, they're not getting married, and part of the problem is Obamacare, and you know that.
No, Tucker, what I know is two things. I know, and you should know, how the insurance industry works. I have never had a car accident in my 30-some years of driving, and yet I pay my car insurance premiums. Maybe I shouldn't pay for insurance because I don't have car accidents. So your argument is actually disingenuous. Number two, young people, you're saying they're poor, they don't have the money to do it. As you know, if they don't have the money to do it, they get subsidies. They get subsidies to help them buy plans. That's a big part of Obamacare.
But why can't they just buy catastrophic plans that suit their needs? Because they're subsidizing other people who lobbied you and every other member of Congress, all the Democrats, with money to include all this stuff that they don't need. And you know that's true.
Well, how about this? Let's agree on this. So you said your 22-year-old son should not have to pay for maternity care or for the possibility that he may choose to have a child someday. How about if I introduce an amendment that says we'll cut his premiums if he signs a paper that says I will never have children? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's the kind of solution that you may come up with, actually. The government telling you how many kids you can have.